Here's our agenda for our time together today. We're going to do welcome and introductions, kind of to beginning that. We're going to talk just briefly about the history of this program and an overview about what the Beyond the Call Entrepreneurial Ministry program is. Then we're going to give you some snapshots into our first retreat. So we'll talk about design thinking, and we're going to show video from the retreat and then and then share some of the slides from that. We'll talk a little bit about spiritual innovation. We'll have another presentation from one of our guests on the role of failure and minimum viable product. We've got two of our students in the program who will just give you a couple of minutes on how they've been using the tools that we're teaching. And then we're going to let you know if you want to go deeper with this work, we'll tell you how you can do that. So that's, and then of course we'll end with some questions and answers. If you have questions when people are talking or things come up, as Allison said, you can use your chat box and type a question in there, and we'll have it when the Q&A time comes too. So feel free to do that. So I want to, if you could turn the video on for a second, Allison, I want to just introduce our folks who are involved with the program who are with us and just ask them to wave. So I'm Don Southworth. I'm the Executive Director of the Unitarian Universalist Ministers Association. I hope most, if not all of you know, Peter Morales, our UUA president. This program is a very much joint collaboration between the UUA and the UUMA. And so Peter has been very active in the program. The folks, Allison Palm, you've met, Allison is our program assistant at the UUMA. Kent Mathias, who serves on our UUMA center team. Kent's portfolio includes the Beyond the Call program, and he's working very closely with the staff on developing the in-depth opportunities that we're putting together. So we'll hear more about those later. Our two students with us today are Emily Bogus, who is in our congregation in New Jersey, I always get my New Jerseys mixed up. Summit? No. Summit, yes.
Summit, New Jersey. That's right. Sorry, I couldn't click mute fast enough.
That's okay. Summit, New Jersey. This is an interfaith program, and we're really delighted that we have the Rabbi David Fine with us. David's in the Seattle area, and they'll both tell you a little bit about their experience. Individual, smaller group work between the retreats. So with this program, what some uniqueness of it is, each retreat is partnering with a different business school around the country. So our first retreat was with Stanford. The next one is with Northwestern. We'll eventually be working with BU and Harvard and Duke and Wake Forest, most likely. So each retreat is with a different either business school or collaboration with the business schools. Each person who came in the program had to bring with them a project or significant innovation that they were working on. And so that was one of the things, the main thing people will do as well as learning skills, will take their project, develop it, reiterate it, prototype it, and over the course of the 2 years, really put it in place in a much stronger way. Another piece of this is that people have to, after they graduate, become coaches and mentors to other folks who are involved in innovation and entrepreneurship. We're really part of this is our kind of mega goal is to really build and strengthen a network of entrepreneurial innovative ministers, cross faiths, and even beyond the people in the 2-year program. So those folks who choose to kind of go into the next series of this, we're going to invite you to continue to build networks. And we know there's a lot more people than the 26 people who are in the program who are doing and interested in innovation. So our hope is to really build a network that continues to give people opportunities to think together, talk together, coach and mentor each other. What we were always very clear about from the beginning is it's not just a program for 26 people who had the resources and the time to spend 2 years and spend thousands of dollars in this program. We want to make these skills available far wider. So the first way we're doing that is we've decided that after every retreat, we're going to have a webinar like this, which will just be kind of an hour and a half where we give you a couple highlights of the program so you get a flavor for it. And then we'll have an invitation if people want to go deeper. We'll offer 3 90-minute sessions where you'll be able to really play with some of the tools that we've used. So we'll tell you more about that and how that'll work later in the call. But that's our plan for how we continue to want to spread this around our movement and beyond. And we because this is kind of fun, we're getting invitations to do presentations inside and outside UUism. So it's like any innovation. We don't know quite where it's going to lead, but we know we've started on the path. And then the last piece of it is the best innovations are going to be given $10,000 awards, and we will be doing everything we can to make sure they're leveraged other places as well. So that gives you a little bit of sense of the background and history of the program. Let's move on. So we're going to start with a little bit about design thinking. Dave Evans was, each retreat has what we call an expert and a practitioner. And so Dave Evans was our expert for the first retreat. And Dave is just kind of an amazing guy. I had a chance to get to know him a little bit a few years ago, thanks to Scotty. Dave is a dyed-in-the-wool entrepreneur who was one of the first couple hundred people who worked at Apple Computer. He helped design the mouse many, many decades ago. And then he went to be a co-founder of Electronic Arts, which is, if you are into video games or had sons like I did, Electronic Arts was some company that I was very familiar with. And he did that. And then really, after doing that work, he went deep in his spiritual life. And so after he left EA, he's been consulting and doing things, but he's been teaching both for about 10 years at Berkeley, a class on designing your life. And then for about the last 7-8 years, courses at Stanford on both designing your life and design thinking. And so design thinking was what we spent a full day with at the retreat. So we're going to play a video of Dave for about 10 minutes so you get a flavor for what design thinking is. Again, I'd ask you, if you haven't muted yourself, I hear some background noise, please do. It's really important, especially on the videos, because the background noise will make it difficult to hear folks hear the video. So please mute yourself and enjoy Dave Evans.
And what is it? The first way to look at design thinking, and we'll do more on this tomorrow, is that it's one of a number of different kinds of thinking. And we just pointed out 4, which are, first of all, there's engineering thinking, right? Actually, I teach design in the School of Engineering at Stanford. And what do engineers do? Engineers solve their way forward. I'll give these guys the slide. Anything you see up here, don't write down. It's free. Don't rewrite stuff we can print. These computers are terrific. And because in engineering, the idea is to get enough equations that you can actually repeatedly solve these problems. And engineering is particularly good at tame problems. The technical term is tame versus wicked. I'll describe wicked in just a moment in some detail. But a tame problem is a solvable problem. A tame problem is building the Golden Gate Bridge the first time. A tame problem is solving cold fusion and using that as a power source. Now, they're really difficult tame problems, but a tame problem is one you can understand so well that you can, once you get enough information and enough science to back it up, you can define a solution to it and repeat it over and over again, and it reliably comes up the same way each time. That's a tame problem. Engineers are really good at tame problems. Then you have business people. And business people are never right. Business people are never really happy. Your brand isn't strong enough, your market share isn't big enough, you're not profitable enough, you just want, how much does a business person want? A little bit more, right? And so we optimize our way forward. We for what we're doing, make it a little better, make it a little better, make it a little better, all, constantly optimizing. And even trying to make quantified sciences out of, in fact, qualitative things like economics, which is really applied psychology. And research thinking, which is what we're particularly good at Stanford. We do 2 things at Stanford: research and education. Why do we do education? Frankly, because we have to. The research is what we really love. And the analysts, right, the whole idea is to understand this thing. Thin slice it, break it down, deconstruct it, tear the living thing asunder. Who cares if you kill it as long as you understand it? And so what we wanted to, biases are showing now. The whole idea is to analyze your way forward. When you win this game, when you win the big prize, you get your PhD or postdoc in analysis, what you win is the next cool question that people conclude is the rigorous question to which we do not yet have an answer. Right? So that's the result of analytical thinking. And lastly, in design thinking, what do? We build our way forward. We actually build our way into the answer. And not because we just think it's cute, but because there is literally no other way to get there from here. It turns out this seemingly iterative, inefficient mechanism that we'll tell you a lot more about in the next 30 hours or so, is the fastest way to get there when you're applying it to the right problem. Another way to look at it. This little matrix here. So I got two axes: synthesis versus analysis, breaking things down, putting them together, and I've got divergence and convergence. How do things come apart? How do they come together? So what's going on there? And certainly at Stanford, we're particularly good at trying to analyze things in a convergent space. We want to come up with an answer or an idea that collapses a situation down analytically in a nice researched way that's very articulate and converges on a singularity, right? What's Hawking's lifelong goal is but to find the theory of everything at the end of a singularity. One equation is going to tell us the whole story. But it turns out analysis only goes so far, and convergence doesn't apply to everything. How many of you spend most of your time converging? How many of you spend more of your time diverging? Yeah, you guys are in kind of diverging synthetic space, right? So there are times when we want to synthesize things or diverge. And all four quadrants have different domains of the human experience or the natural world involved in them, and design wants to operate in all four. Question?
What is convergence?
Convergence. So everything's coming together. So, when it turns out this aspect of quantum physics and this aspect of astrophysics and this aspect of neuroscience all come to the same conclusion, we're converging on one thing. As opposed to we're now diverging to different places and we can't put them together in convenient ways. Okay. So in that kind of a space, the design, we would argue, is an integrative methodology that's particularly applicable to wicked problems. What is a wicked problem? Okay, a wicked problem is, first of all, it's a concept developed by a bunch of urban planners at Cal Berkeley back in the late 70s. Anybody ever do urban planning? Anybody involved in the public sector, that city stuff? Let's invent a city. What do you say? Let's have a great city here. That's a hard problem, particularly while people are already living in it. Because they're occupied. And so these guys came up with an idea, Conklin and others came up with an idea of the definition of a wicked problem, and they had 10 attributes. And then years go by, 10's too many, I can't do it, so we knocked it down to 6. So the 6 attributes of a wicked problem is currently identified and are very popular with design people are the following. So the 6 rule definition were Conklin derived from written by Weber. You can look this stuff up if you want. Number 1, the problem is not understood until after the formulation of a solution. You don't get it till you're done. Number 2, wicked problems have a no stopping rule, right? The Super Bowl is on Sunday, right? Which and I think there's something probably sort of ironically poetic about the UUMA got together on Super Bowl weekend. We don't want to hate. But nonetheless, in football, football's not lifelike at all in the sense that we're doing this incredibly violent high-speed thing, and then a whistle blows, and everybody stops and goes, "So, how'd that go for you? What do you think about it? Have a huddle, let's chat about it, we'll hold hands for a minute, No, we'll line up again and then beat the living crap out of each other." So it's a really bizarre human behavior. It's like war for 3 seconds, talk about it for a minute and a half. War for 3 seconds, talk about it for a little while. Whoa, the stopping rule in football is bizarre. Then you have this thing called soccer, let's just play. We'll play until it's over, or basketball, almost nonstop. And life is much more in this no stopping space. Solutions to wicked problems are not right or wrong. Right? You're not right or wrong, this is what it is. Is that the right way to have laid out San Francisco? How do you know? every wicked problem is essentially novel and unique. Once you've got a wicked problem really figured out, you don't get a nice reusable answer you can just put back in and use it. It's not like that plastic parsley on the airplane. They can't just use it over and over again. Every solution to a wicked problem is a one-shot operation, kind of the same thing said a different way. Again, once you finally figure out what you're doing and what the problem really is, and you deliver that solution, it's done. You kind of can't come back to it. And wicked problems have no given alternative solution. So with my Golden Gate Bridge example, if we don't build the bridge, what are we going to do? Well, you've got the ferry, you've got helicopters, and you've got staying in San Francisco. Forget Marin County, who needs them? The point being, they don't have given alternatives, so you can't get there from somewhere else. Now, you don't have to have 6 out of 6 to score a wicked problem. But my guess is, how many of you spend more of your time on wicked problems than tame problems? Yeah, because you're dealing with the human condition mostly, right? Yeah. My wife's second career is in homelessness. She is the chair of the board of a homeless service center in Santa Cruz. We live just 22 miles across the bay. I can look right at this building from my deck, actually, if I could see it. We actually live in Santa Cruz and then go over the hill to Stanford these days. So she's dealing with really wicked problems, and I'm dealing with nominally wicked problems. And most of you are dealing with, as I read through the brief descriptions of each of your projects, most of you are dealing with fairly wicked problems. Which is one of the reasons that when Scotty said, "Can you come help us?" I thought maybe the answer might be yes. So we've got these kind of wicked problems, problems you can't just write an equation for, you can't just write a check for, they don't just go away conveniently. Things like education, life, and even spiritual innovation. Because you're all trying to be entrepreneurial universalist ministers and caregivers and program providers. So from the point of view of what we're working on in design, we think we would like to hang with you guys. Because you're working on the kind of problems we think we're not that bad at.
So that's a little taste of Dave Evans and design thinking. 2 things every time I watch this, seen it a few times. Wicked problems, the first thing I think wicked is New England, and it's not connected to New England. And the second thing is, when I was in seminary, I couldn't believe how many colleagues, I can think of 3 colleagues I met in seminary who actually did come out of urban planning. So I don't know if urban planning is something that is good for minister development or not, but I know that there's several colleagues who do have that background. So if nothing else, you can go preach on wicked problems. I think that does preach. I haven't asked the students, but I think it will. In the course of we were together for 3 days with Dave for about a day and a half. I wanted to give you we want to give you just a taste of some of the exercises we did. So we did lots of different exercises. And I've only chosen 3, and it's just, again, to give you a little taste of it. Some of these maybe you've done before in different ways. I've got, before this program, I've actually did take a course at Stanford, a 1-day course on design thinking. So I've been playing with this a little bit in the past. In addition, we did fun stuff. All this, for me, I think most of the students, it was all fun, but we did things like build towers out of marshmallows and spaghetti, and did some fun things with circles and some, touchy-feely kind of crafty design, getting that side of our brain working. So these are the 3 I chose are not quite so much in that realm. But the first one that I just want to highlight was, people came in, as I said, with a project idea, and people's development of that project, no matter where it was, as usually when we get an idea, it becomes kind of fixed. This is the great idea. And so one of the first exercises we did together was innovation planning, where we developed 3 project alternatives. And so this is a real simple exercise you can do with just about anything. And so what we did is we had whatever our project was, and we said, okay, go break it into 3 different projects. So show that next, the worksheet if you can, Allison. And so this was a worksheet we used where we came up with innovation plan number 1, innovation plan number 2, innovation plan number 3. And what was so powerful about this, I think for the students, was, again, we get attached to whatever idea we have, and oftentimes we just say, okay, we've all agreed this is it, let's run with this. And I'll speak somebody who's been involved with innovation and entrepreneurship a long time, the discipline to say, let's do 2 more ideas. that usually is not one that I've practiced very often. So I think everybody, we're broken into different cohort groups. I can say everybody in my group, this enhanced their thinking and their projects quite a bit. And so this was a way to kind of look at the innovation through 4 lenses: resources. I like the idea of confidence, coherence, and so we kind of all worked on this. In fact, right now we're going to have our second cohort group meeting since the retreat, and next week we're all going to be working on this a little bit next week. So it's not something we just in the exercise in the class. It's also something people have been playing with as well. The next one that we held up was brainstorming prototypes. So one of the things that we did talk a lot about was when you're doing innovation, you do prototypes. And you try things, and we're going to show you a little piece on failure in a minute. You kind of expect that you're going to try different things, and some will work, but probably most won't. And so an exercise we did about brainstorming prototypes is we looked at our innovation plans that we had just come up with, the 3, and we picked a couple of ideas from those innovation plans. And we all kind of wrote questions that we wanted to go deeper in about those ideas. And so then after we did that, we broke into small groups with each other, and that'll be the next slide, Allison. Is we broke into triads. The first person kind of shared what their prototype candidate and questions was, and then we brainstormed all the different prototypes that could help them answer and inform those questions. And so it was just kind of popcorn brainstorming, but it was all about this idea of prototyping. And then what happened is we voted on best ideas, and then we moved on to another person. So it was a fairly quick way for us to get lots of ideas, lots of thoughts, and kind of try one on with people and say, here's a potential prototype. So that was an exercise we did, prototyping light. And the last one is one that is one that we started in the retreat and was our first kind of homework after the retreat, and that's where it was actionability. One of the things that we know about innovation and I'll say ministers, is we often are really big on vision, and sometimes how to make that vision come to true life, we're not always as good on. And so the actionability thing was where we really went to the next level and said, identify 1 to 3 initial action steps you can take to make some of your prototypes happen. And so the homework on the first cohort group meetings were, let's talk about what your commitment was and what have you actually done, and always about a bias towards action. So those are just 3 some examples of the exercises to give you a taste of some of the things you do with design thinking. And if you asked all 26 people in the class and the core team and the staff, you'd probably get probably a different 3 favorite from everybody, because there was quite a few things we worked on. The next thing we just want to touch on is a concept that many of us got excited about, and that's where and you saw it in Dave's presentation about spiritual innovation. So I was telling people earlier today, I think the most frequent question I get when I talk to colleagues about this is, so what's the definition of entrepreneurial ministry? People's answers are different on that depending on who you're talking to. But for me, sorry, I can't turn this phone off. Forgive me. There we go. So basically, it's innovation. It's starting something new, whether it's inside or outside an existing organization. It's creating innovation and implementing innovation. So this concept of spiritual innovation that Dave spoke about, the definition that he gave us for that is the spiritual discipline of discerning imagination in incarnational practice. And you might say, well, what does that mean? Or what does that look like? Which in the next slide, he invited us to look at 4 ways for spiritual innovation. So one of the things we talked about was the Quaker concept of walk in the way, where kind of like the way will show. It is, some of you probably know about that perspective about kind of the way unfolds. So one thing we do when we're committed to spiritual innovation is we walk in the way expectantly. So we're kind of always on the lookout for what's happening, what's occurring in our environment, what's creating the innovation, the opportunity for it. Second is listen for longing. And we'll talk some more about that when we talk a little bit about when our next speaker speaks a little bit about failure and minimum viable product. Cultivate the sacred imagination and lean into the leading. So these are just 4 kind of ways of being about spiritual innovation all the time. And one of the things that I really got out of the retreat, and obviously I'm not a student, I'm one of the core team, was that spiritual innovation is kind of like a spiritual practice, a spiritual discipline, where if you show up in the world kind of with the eyes wide open to spiritual innovation, you do it on a regular basis, and there's kind of ways to do it, just as there are different spiritual practices, spiritual disciplines, and in coming to the world with innovation, looking and listening for new ways, you could say God or the sacred is unfolding. It really is. You could. It's not just one of the questions that people often ask is entrepreneurial something you train, or is it something people are born with? And I would say, obviously, it's a little both, but there's definitely practices that encourage innovation, and that's some of the things we learned about in the retreat. The next piece is we're going to show you our practitioner. And so, as I mentioned, each retreat has an expert to teach us something, and a practitioner who's somebody who's actually living spiritual innovation, spiritual entrepreneurship. And so, for this retreat, we invited the Reverend Nicole LaMarche to be with us. Nicole is a UCC minister. She served congregations out in New England, and she calls herself now a spiritual entrepreneur. And she's the organizing pastor of the Silicon Valley Progressive Faith Community, which is a new congregation in the South Bay that actively engages in personal and social transformation. Starting a new congregation in Silicon Valley is not the easiest thing to do in the world. A church attendance, congregational attendance in Silicon Valley is even lower than many other parts of the country. So it's a challenging gig she signed up for. She's also, some of you may know Nicole because her husband is Jeremy Nickel, who is a UU minister who serves our Mission Peak congregation in Fremont. And so I kind of got to know Nicole and her work in part through Jeremy. So she spent a half day with us. What we want to highlight from her work on us is about failure, which is a very, very critical piece of innovation. And also we'll show you a little bit about what minimum viable product's all about.
There was a long time where I did a bunch of stuff where no one came. I sat alone and cried and wondered what the hell I was doing. Just a reminder, failure is the tuition you pay to gain experience. There's literally no way to do this without failing. That's just, you can't do it. So after living in San Jose for a year, building the website, connecting with people, sharing the vision, raising more money, getting a sense of things, I was ready to do something, but I didn't know what. And I ended up on a mom blog where I realized that they were lamenting about Easter egg hunts where their kids would get mauled for eggs to celebrate the resurrection. So I figured it was worth a shot to try to do an Easter egg hunt that was progressive, whatever that means, focused on sharing. And even though I had no idea how to do it or whatever, it's like, I'm gonna try. I'm gonna see what happens. And so this was me, my very first thing. And I was sure that no one would come. I fed it over every detail. I was sure it would be Eliza and our caregiver and her son. And the night before, it was Jeremy and Tom and I, like, stuffing the eggs, because more had come in. So the day came, and a whole hell of a lot of people came, and it blew my mind. And I'm one of those people where emotions are right on the surface all the time. The new family, I have like another tear. I'm like, oh my God, it's, I got lots of emails. They saw our name. You can't even really see me. I'm like right there standing on a thing. It was amazing. It was just grace all around. But before I get into all the things that were wrong about it, I just want to remind you of this. There are 2 mistakes one can make along the road to truth. Not going all the way and not starting. So after this great event, and part of me was just like on a cloud, and my man, who's just been steadfast and amazing, he said, I need to tell you something. There's this thing called the sophomore slump. And I was like, what? This was a great success. The next thing is going to be a great success. Well, The next thing I did the next month was kind of a bomb. So I did the same promotion that I did before. I had a great speaker, a beautiful day. There were 10 people there. Yeah. So so we kept on, did a bunch of stuff. This is us at Pride, did a kids concert, there's pumpkins in the park. And it's only failure if you don't learn something, right? I've returned to that again and again. So in September of 2013, I hosted a party, and I basically said, okay, I've spent all this time gathering people. Whoever wants to help me make this happen, come. And so we did. And it was about that time that I was introduced to lean thinking. But a lean startup is one that's focused immediately on your customer. What do they want? What do they need? Again, a lot of the church people I grew up with were in the business of assuming what people wanted and needed. But this kind of thing is exactly opposite of that. But the problem is we don't know who our people are, right? You don't know who the customer is until you start doing stuff. So that's kind of the challenge, is not knowing totally who you're dealing with. So this is me again. In January of 2014, after hosting tons of events and showing up as many places as I could, we were ready to do our first worship service. And we did it in a theater with a bar in downtown San Jose, and this is what I was like the day before and every second leading up to it. And there's us. Yeah. People came to support us. We were finally at the point of doing something where people could show up in this way. And in a way, it was amazing. It was a miracle. But I hadn't quite yet internalized the lean thinking concept. So the sacred space was awesome. We had all this crazy stuff. But then volunteers quickly became drained because this was just the whole thing. This theater space was incredible, but we had challenges. And I soon realized that I hadn't yet internalized the concept of a minimum viable product.
Let me say a word about minimum viable product. I know, people will have heard of this phrase at least a little bit. The idea here is we want to most startups are torn between these two different approaches to building product. One which I call maximizing chance of success. Says, look, we've only got one shot at this, so let's get it right. That's what I talked about in startup number one. We're going to ship it when it's right. And that actually is perfectly rational. If you only have one shot, you want to take the best shot you can, build the most perfect product you can. The issue is, of course, you can spend, say 5 years of stealth R&D building a product you think customers want, and then discover to your chagrin that they don't. So the other possible extreme approach is to say, well, let's just do release early, release often. People have heard that phrase. And this just says, look, we'll just throw whatever crap we have out there, and then we'll hear what customers say, and we'll do whatever they say. But the issue there is if you show a product to 3 customers, you get 30 opinions, and now what do you do? So minimum viable product is kind of a synthesis of those two possible extremes. We want to figure out what's the minimum set of features necessary to engage with those early evangelists, to start the learning feedback loop going. And so sometimes I get to ask the question, well, how do you know if you found the minimum viable product? And from a theoretical point of view, this is quite challenging. You could make a really interesting argument that any given feature is absolutely 100% necessary to learn. But the good news is there's no reason to deal with this theoretical issue, because if you're like me and like every entrepreneur I know, what you think the minimum viable product is way too big. Probably 2 orders of magnitude too many features. I'm not exaggerating. So the easy formula for finding out what the minimum viable product is take what you think it is right now and cut it in half, and do that 2 more times, and ship that. And I know, customers are going to absolutely hate that thing that's only 1/8 as big as you thought it should be, right? And that's fine. If you ship that and customers say, you moron, how could you have shipped without having features X, Y, and Z, the things that were all going to be on your roadmap anyway? You can say, good idea, good point, and then go build features X, Y, and Z. But you may be surprised, well, of course not you, but maybe you know a friend, who would be surprised to ship a product as I did, and nobody cares. They don't say, you idiot, it should have features X, Y, and Z. The worst fate of any shipping any product is just nobody cares. You don't get any feedback at all, right? That's what most features on most products do. They're just dead weight. So what we want to do is try to eliminate those and ship without them. Of course, that's because visionary customers can fill in the gaps. right? Early adopters can be very forgiving of missing features. They see the vision, and you can be in dialogue with them going through that learning feedback loop. Here are the kind of the reasons why people don't do the minimum viable product. I'll just try to address them really quickly. First, the fear of the false negative. So I ship my minimum viable product. If it had just had that one extra feature, customers would have loved it, but because it didn't, of course, they hated it. So duh, why would I bother shipping something I know customers will hate? And there's nothing wrong with that reasoning. All I want you to do is ship anyway. So maybe customers will love it even though it doesn't have feature X. And then you can kind of go on and be very successful. And if you're wrong, and they really do need feature X, then you can just build feature X. If you want to do minimum viable product, you have to be prepared to iterate. And so you have to have the courage to say, yeah, we'll ship something, get negative feedback, and respond.
So it turns out that I'm not any different than a lot of dreamers and entrepreneurs. Instead of building the minimum viable product, I built the most expensive staffed thing in an awesome space. And it was quickly clear that that wasn't going to work. And we were focused on things like the technological problems. And but at some point, if you're optimizing the wrong thing, it doesn't matter, right? People say things like, oh, we need to advertise more. Well, no. So the difference between optimization versus learning, if you're building the wrong thing, optimizing it or marking it is not going to yield significant results. So hopefully you won't be like me and wait too long because you wanted to build this perfect thing. Hopefully you'll just start and getting feedback. So one of the things that was cool was, this theater with the bar, and it was really awesome. I had this idea that it would just be young professionals, because that's how I saw myself. But again, when you're doing this, what's the problem? You don't know who your customer is. So who showed up? Baby boomers. Mm-hmm. So a theater with a bar, ooh, not quite the right thing. We were on what's called achieving failure, which is successfully executing a plan that leads nowhere. So I was crushed. I really was. It was a really hard time. And on Ash Wednesday, I drank a whole bottle of wine and puked my guts out and realized that most of my plans were wrong. There was a lot that was right, but most of the plans were wrong. So I gave up wine for Lent. And then I realized that it was time to get serious about the feedback. And at every point of the way, we had asked for feedback and given people opportunities to fill it out. But now is the time to take it seriously.
Thank you, Allison. So minimum viable product was something that a lot of us could relate to, and especially those of us who dream big. And so we've got some experiences at the UUMA. I would imagine that if you reflect on this in your own experience with leading projects and innovation, you might relate to this in some different ways. But we've asked our two students to share some of the tools and things they've been using. And David Fine's going to go first because he's one of the students who has been especially working with minimum viable project. So I'm going to turn it over to David to tell you a little bit about what he's been doing. And then what we're going to do in this section is after each of our students share a bit, we'll have some time to ask them questions. So remember how to raise your hand if you're on the video, or use the chat box. And if you're on the phone, you can chime in if you have a question for David. So David, take it away.
All right, thank you. So I'm excited because I'm minimally viable, but here we go. So I came in thinking big, thinking real big. I had this large goal, and that was going to be to create something, a whole package, a whole set of things for our smaller congregations. I wanted to create something that our funders would really want to support. So desirable that people would want to take part in it. Funders, again, would say, here's lots of money for you. It would include evaluation. It would include metrics, self-assessment, communities of practice, building leaders. And great, I'll be an entrepreneur and create this and sell it. And really was happily reminded, go minimally viable, start somewhere. This bias toward action. Some things that really were on my mind. I thought of Dave Evans saying, you can't solve a problem you aren't willing to have. because I thought early on, no, I already know the answer. I don't have problems. I already have great presentations. And really, it led to the inquiry process of hearing what are my clients really looking for. As we just heard, Eric Reese just saw it up on the screen. We have to learn what customers really want, not what they say they want, or what we think they should want. And that was part of my challenge. I work with the North American organization, a religious movement with Reform Judaism. I had to do some unlearning thinking here that wanted to come in, bringing in the best, but in fact, had to unlearn the fact that the best is the only way to go. I had to think minimally viable. Think of prototypes. That the beta is not the product with bugs in it, but the beta is a way to present and invite others to become my co-collaborators. How do I gather people to do some great thinking? How do I not take things full cloth? I had, as you heard Don talk about, innovation planning, break things down. Beware of shoulding. Here's what I should do. As we just heard, scale it back, take it in half twice. So what did I do? I did some thinking, met with a great deal of congregational presidents, met with 40 different rabbis. I had the advantage of being at our North American conference, but really to hear and to think, what would you want? What is most important? So what is that product? I've iterated. Again, keeping that bias toward action. We're going to have a local retreat for leadership development for those from small congregations. That will be our prototype. What's critical, though, as Nicole said, not to think we only have one shot at it. I'm going to do it close to home here in the Pacific Northwest. My original thought was we're going to have a North American program. It's going to be great. We're going to get the world's best people. No, do it locally. It doesn't need to be a 3-day program with a high cost. And I was reminded of that. I knew it was going well because large congregations have wanted to join in. We had a great internal debate. Who should be involved? Which meant that it was striking. There was energy. People liked it, that metric that we saw. Should we involve clergy, and in what way? This is not a long-term planning session. This is just developing leaders. But I want to listen and evaluate and try it out. Lots of support within the system and able to really collaborate, bring people in from different areas. You heard about convergent thinking. We're there. So I'm looking forward to it, but I have to really almost keep that phrase minimally viable, not whole cloth. Good enough is going to be good enough. So I'm going to stop there.
Thanks, David. Well said. Any questions for David? You can raise your hand, or you can, if you're on the phone, just unmute and ask your question.
I'm ready.
You were so thorough, David, that you've just awed them. They're speechless.
My family members never feel that way. I don't see why that would happen here as well.
Well, we'll have more time for questions later. If nobody has a question, we'll have Emily get a chance to share. Anybody before we move to Emily? Okay, Emily, you want to share kind of what you've been doing with the program since you've been home?
Yeah. So our time together, as you probably saw in the videos, was impressive. And it was one of those experiences where you just hope that it grows in you so that you start to live it, as opposed to it's some ideas that you have and then they stay in that notebook that you have and you never get back to them. And that was not my experience. I really started using the tools almost immediately the moment I got back. So I'm a minister of a 400 member congregation in New Jersey, in a very dense part of New Jersey, with a lot of UU congregations around me and a very strong interfaith organization in the city that I work in. And so my project was all about collaboration as innovation, specifically about knowing what our congregation is, knowing that we have abundance, but we also need to be sustainable. So what is the one thing that we do really well, and to do that thing well, but then to work with lots of other organizations and houses of worship in order to grow our possibilities, that we're stronger together and that we know what we're doing within that system of collaboration. And so I know that we collaborate with people all the time, but what I've been trying to seek is a process for collaboration that you can use in lots of different areas. So specifically, my projects, and one of the things that the organizer, the designer said to me is, you have too many projects, you got to zero in. And what I found is that collaboration is kind of happening everywhere. It's been very hard to zero in. So I'll just give you a couple of examples. So in the last 6 months, my congregation has decided to build its governance on a collaborative model, so that we will have two called ministers who share the ministry. And then we have an executive director. And we sit on a leadership team together. So that right now we're in search for that other minister to come in. It's a little bit different than what has been done in other places. And we're specifically looking at Marshall Ganz's snowflake model that we got at the UUMA Ministry Days as a way of looking at collaboration as a governance model within the congregation. So right now I'm living into shared ministry in a different format, and what that collaboration means and who has power within that organization. And our congregation voted on that. The other part is that our congregation is intentionally trying to create a multi-generational community that involves worship, religious education, small groups. And so what does that mean, and how do you have to collaborate to be in there? The third one is a multi-faith community. So how do I work? I'm the president of the Interfaith Council. How do we work together so that one congregation who is fantastic at congregational care or pastoral care is the lead on that, and we're the lead on social justice ministry, and how do we use those tools effectively? So, and then the other part is amongst the New Jersey UU congregations, how are we collaborating on worship and themes, small group, and even some job sharing? So collaboration is happening all over the place, but what works against us is our sense of individualism and to some extent consumerism. So what I found almost immediately in collaborating was that everybody thought they had the best idea, and they didn't want to give up their best idea. And so we went from wanting to be collaborative and then coming away feeling like community was the suckiest thing that we ever were a part of. I don't know if any of you have that experience. We're sitting on a committee together. No, I didn't think so. So how can we make community and collaboration feel good? And so that's the process that I'm trying to create. And the tools, I'm really focusing on the tools that Dave Evans gave us. The design process itself is inherently collaborative. And there are so many tools. So for instance, it was very helpful to have what they showed here, the definition of what kind of problem do we have? We have a wicked problem, and having my board go through that process of, is this a wicked problem? We just did it we're trying to raise an additional $100,000 to bring in a new DRE, and we don't have the money, and that's a wicked problem, and how are we gonna raise the money? And so one of the tools that I used was a mind mapping tool that Dave Evans showed us, where you had to think of one thing, and then every individual had their own mind mapping exercise that they had to just brainstorm of what are the first three things that come to mind. And so we had I gave them big Post-its, and so everybody got to see what their crazy ideas were. And some of their crazy ideas were rob a bank, that we were gonna rob a bank in order to bring on a new DRE. And I will tell you that robbing a bank was so when we shared the different ideas, robbing a bank became one of those, it just became a fuselage of okay, we might not rob a bank because that's illegal, but how do we beg, borrow, and steal to get what we want? So instead of saying, well, we just don't have enough money, they became so tied to the vision of having a DRE that they were willing to really think creatively about how we get the money. We're not there yet, but I have to keep reminding them, but that is one of the mind mapping tool was a great brainstorming tool that got them out of well, we just can't do it. The other part that I will say, the other tool, Dave Evans talked a lot about how to negotiate the feeling of being stuck and how to design our way forward. I have to go down a little bit. So I will say that as one of the ministers in the congregation, there is this sense that I'm the expert on things, and I feel great pressure to have answers to things, and I don't have the answers. And so I find that sometimes when I don't have the answers, I feel I get stuck, and then therefore I'll just avoid the situation. And what the design process has helped me do is just to take 1 or 2 small steps that'll just get me going, right? I'm just going to work on it for 5 minutes, and then we'll see where I go. The other part is that it's helped me reach out to lots of people and to say, I don't have the answer to this. Can you help me? So the other part is that we create a design lab. So for instance, with multi-generational worship, well, like, what does it really look like? We are actually creating a worship experimentation team and creating and inviting people on who are the unusual suspects. So getting web designers into, like bringing their thinking on web designing, not so much for the web part of our service, but how do you look at the world, and how could the way that you look at the world help us create a service that would be innovative for all people? So it's essential, like bringing in people who could help us think differently and see with new eyes. Brainstorming, mind mapping, reaching out to new people. And so the last thing that I'll say is one of the tools that I think it's given me is this sense of listening to the individual, and then also inviting the individual to sacrifice maybe their vision for the larger vision. So my last tool is that we just started a Green Earth Ministry program in our congregation, and it was a meeting packed with people who were very dedicated to their own ideas of how we're going to save the planet. It was like I was ready for it to blow up, but I was able to use the design process in that meeting so that I asked everybody to write up in 10 years' time, if you could have one impact on the state of New Jersey and you'd be the most proud, like what would be the thing you'd be most proud of? And so everybody got to be heard, and everybody was very inspired by what they heard from everyone else. And then I said, so what would you be willing? I want you to go around with Post-it notes, and what would you be willing to give up? How would you be willing to give up your project in order to do that project? And like, they were so excited. They were happy to give up their projects to see all the different votes, and everybody got votes. And so I will just say that, I don't know if that's helpful, but there are so many tools that I've been able to use almost immediately that have made collaboration feel fun and inviting, and have the individual be heard, but the community and the community life be valued.
Thanks, Emily. That was inspiring. Any questions for Emily about what she's been doing with some of the tools, or what's happening in her congregation?
Oh, I have one more thing to say. I'm sorry. And that is in the brainstorming exercise, Dave Evans taught us that you can't judge the different ideas that come up. And I have been using a bell to ding people when they start judging an idea. It is the most helpful, hilarious tool ever. Sorry.
That's great. Sherman, did you have a question or comment? I see that you unmuted. Sherman? No? Okay. Any questions for Emily? A quiet crowd today.
Peter has a question.
Oh, good.
Well, it was one that I wasn't quick enough, but it's for both Emily or David. Mostly for David, because he talked about the minimal viable thing, which is something I relate to a lot, because we at the UUA have a kind of a culture of rolling out big things, and not so much of testing and trying and prototyping. What were the kind of things you started giving up, and how did you get through that process? Because I suspect that's not easy for most of us.
What I would say is I am not done yet. I am, it's a not yet, but well on the way. I think I wanted to have this great look. And again, we talk as, people who are looked to as part of the movement. People say, well, here's the great thing you're producing. And to say, you know what, it's going to be a great thing. This is going to be successful, and it's not going to be the be all and end all. And it's a reminder for all of us. There's a certain humility in that I have to go back to individually. I think that we in our congregations, we can offer you everything all the time. And it's going to be, we can offer you great things. And we can offer you from, I'm surprised where I'm going to go right now, the deepest part of our souls and ourselves. And a willingness to be a bit vulnerable. Yes, it may not have been all that you wanted. And you're right, we could add more onto it. But it's going to be solid, and it's going to make a difference to help build this congregation and the kind of world that we want. I don't know if that answered the question. If I did it, Peter.
Thank you.
And I would just add the sentence of, I've been really incorporating, I've got it up on my wall, fail sooner to proceed faster. And so I have this dream that every fall, we'll have finally put all the programs and all of the tools into place so that it'll be perfect in the fall, and all of our dreams will have happened. And I have really given up the illusion of the great start in the fall, and that every week we're trying something new and learning from it and adding to it.
Although let me say, it is a challenge. That's a personal challenge. And most of us have gotten where we've gotten to because we tend to succeed. So there's no, be fully humble. It's a challenge.
Well, some of you may have heard me say this. When I was doing interviews down in Silicon Valley, I had a chance to meet with this guy at Google who's been teaching meditation there, and he's become pretty much a big star. And he's written a book about it, and it's the most popular class. And we were talking, and he was telling me that at Google, if you go into your evaluation and you've achieved all your goals for the year, you get a negative evaluation. Because Google is trying to promote a culture of innovation. And so what they want is they want people who are really, trying different things. And so you go in and they expect you not to hit all your goals. And I know for me, kind of not just with the retreat, but in working more and more in this entrepreneurial innovative world, I think it's not just me personally, but as David says, our culture of who we are, the idea of, well, I'm going to go up and I'm going to just do a lousy sermon, or I'm going to fail, or it's just it's a hard cultural thing for us to get to. And Nicole talked about it, and I think this fail fast is a common phrase, or if not fail, at least, do something in smaller ways. So I think a lot of us have been challenged by that, but also can see the value in it. A question came across from Deborah. There was mention of many tools, processes. I'm wondering if there's a resource of the snowflake model and some of the others mentioned. The tools from the retreat, that's what we're showing you here, and you can take them as you wish. The follow-up that we're going to do, if people want to get into that, we'll go more deeply into some specific tools where you get a chance to play with them. The snowflake model that Emily mentioned comes from the keynote address that we had at Ministry Days last year. And that talk is available on the UUMA website if you weren't there, or if you want to kind of revisit it with Marshall Gans. And so that's where she was referring to. I can't remember if he has a video or a slide in the presentation or not, but that presentation, we can send the link to you if you can't find it on our website. Michelle wrote the leanstartup.com. It speaks a little more about this lean startup, minimal viable product. And I guess Emily answered it, Deborah's question. Any other questions for, David or Emily about the tools and how they've been using them? If not, let's go to the next. Oh, Peter.
How did you introduce these things in a palatable, you did sort of like some of the things we're trying to do here. How did you break some of these concepts to people in a congregational setting?
Well, one of the things that I was tasked to do at the end of the retreat was what is the first step I have to take? And the first step I had to take was to bring my leadership team on board. so the executive director and the other minister. And so I gave them a presentation, and then we immediately decided that we needed to use it in a board retreat that we were planning. So I went from the leadership team to the board retreat. And so from there, I've been using it with committees. So it's kind of spreading. I will say that the hilarious part of it is that it spreads, but they don't have all the information yet. So like they won't test it. Like once they'll have one idea and then that's the idea and they go off with it. So there has been a little bit of like, you have to come back in, but it's kind of, and so I'm also bringing it to our New Jersey cluster and my Interfaith Council.
Norm asked a question, how much can you plan for outcomes and how much is moving to take advantage of serendipity? But I have a thought, but I wanted to go to our students or other people on the core team. If you have any thoughts on that?
John, I would love to hear you answer, and then I can respond. Like I can stack on.
Well, I would say that we're early we've only done one of the 4 retreats. So part of what we're going to do at the next retreat will be about planning and goal setting and things like that. And one of the phrases that I mentioned from Dave's presentation was about kind of the way, and to me that's kind of what I would say respond to this is like you have a sense of where you want to go because there's you have to start out in a direction, but what you can't do is you can't get so wedded to that outcome that basically that's all you see. So I think I don't know if it's serendipity, but I think it's constant learning, evaluating, prototyping. We talked a lot in the retreat about iteration and kind of the idea that you start something, but then you tweak it, you iterate it. And again, I'm not sure that that's necessarily something that's in ministerial religious culture, at least from my perspective. I know that when I was in the business world, I think we did a lot more of that than I've experienced, at least since I've been in ministry. So I think it's the idea is you have to go out. In the class, we were pretty clear. You have to have a project, so you have to have an idea where you're headed. But I think if you we've had 3 months of this, right? If you ask the 26 students in the class, is your project exactly what it was when you came into this class? My hunch is nobody would say yes because of what they've already been testing and doing. So that's my thoughts. Emily, David, Peter.
So I will jump in. What was striking. And Nicole, looking over my notes, Nicole made a statement of, a name is not a vision. So how do we keep, I think all the time, the large picture in mind that we're designing toward, that it's not about the project, it's about what's the real big goal, what's the outcome, maybe there's capital O outcome and a small o outcome. And how do we distinguish those and keep them both in mind, that they're always both there, and not to get caught up in one or the other.
And I would just add that it's very, I agree that you have to have the intention. So you can fall into the trap of being a reactionary, and that is not what we're trying to do. There is an intention and we seek that. And within the intention, there's experimentation. And there's lots of serendipity. You just happen to meet the person, but it's almost like because you're looking for the person shows up or the tool shows up. But the intention has to be there.
Yeah, and when the design team kind of put together the scope of the 2 years, the reason we decided to start with design thinking is we wanted folks to kind of have a different lens to look through and give tools so people could look at the world a little differently. And that was kind of why we started with design thinking, because for most of us, it was some new ways of looking at the world. And that was the hope that because it kind of engenders creativity, which is a serendipitous process often. Let's see. Thank you, Norm.
One thing I'm going to add to that, I'm going to get the quote wrong, but Dave Evans talked about being lucky. And people who are ready are lucky. And Don, as you're saying, right, that does occur for people, but it's not pure chance. You kind of, I'm almost not making sense. I know, but by doing this work, you increase your odds.
Any other questions? Kent or comment? Kent, go ahead.
I think sort of starting to segue into the going deep conversations. One of the aspects of this that people have been touching on today is, so there's entrepreneurs and intrapreneurs, and a number of our folks are doing congregationally or existing religious movement, spiritual innovation. And in that predominant volunteer base, many of our people are the design team and the customers at the same time. And so getting buy-in to the concept of failing our way forward and being open to change when I might like this product, but we're seeing that a broad spectrum of the community may not in the coming years. I think that's where some of the pull and push, and maybe that's what's behind Peter's question, Emily, how did you get your folks to start doing this without a backlash? So I think we'll be sharing some of that because we'll certainly need skill and serendipity to get more buy-in to people to participate in these things, to get to the deeper spiritually renewing outcomes we desire.
Andrew asked a question about what kind of theological grounding has been done to support the implementation design thinking. We didn't show this in the slides, but we began the retreat with some theological grounding for innovation and entrepreneurship, and reflected on what that means. And sometimes one of the questions or concerns about entrepreneurial ministry is this somehow giving into the consumer culture? And so we did definitely, one of the things that we'll continue to revisit throughout the 2 years is the theology, the theological grounding, both of our faith, but also what's it mean? And, innovation and entrepreneurship, isn't a new thing in the 21st century when it comes to religious life or Unitarian Universalist history. So we definitely have included that in making sure we don't forget that we are ministers and there's a theological component to what we're doing.